Hi, this is Manny with Classic Auto Repair. We are looking at a 1970 Cadillac Coupe de Ville. Very original, low mileage car. And we installed the air conditioning compressor. This is an OEM design, remanufactured. The clutch was broken off, it sheared off on the old compressor. And so we installed a new one. It's got the new clutch, put some new belts on it. Put a new AC filter, which is called an accumulator or dryer. That's this part right here. It's right next to the condenser, which was flushed out. New condenser installed. And the other part that we replaced is the expansion valve, which is, there's two of them. One of them is down there on the bottom. The other one's underneath this this protective insulator. And these have very small orifices in them, and it's what converts the Freon gas to make it cold. What happens is you get contamination in here, and it plugs up the valve, and you don't get cold air movement into the evaporator case. So what we're doing here is we replace those parts, charge the system with Freon and oil, and install the new port for the R134A gas that is now used to service these older R12 systems. That's all been done. So everything under the hood is working correctly. We do have some climate control parts that are still failing. One of them doesn't have to do with the air conditioning, but the heater. This is the heater control valve, and it gets its vacuum source from this control module. And I'll show you this on the computer. They have guys that can rebuild these and restore them, but it basically creates a vacuum source to the different pods that make the doors open and close in the evaporator case, which directs the heat or the air conditioning where it needs to come out of the vents. Basically, we're about 90% there on the air conditioning side, because the compressor, evaporator, accumulator, everything's working the way it should. We're getting down to 40 degrees on our air conditioning system. But without all of this working correctly, there's no way to get the Freon from the compressor to the evaporator case and out into the dash vents. That's the part that right now is faulting. And that has to do with, again, with all these vacuum hoses, pods, vacuum pods, anything here that has a crack or that needs to be rebuilt, like this control head, is going to make this system fault. And if we come inside of the car, let me show you a little bit more about what I'm talking about. So this is your control head right here. And as you can see here, you got a temperature control head, and you can turn this dial. And what that does is it changes the vacuum source to the control valve in the engine compartment that I pointed to earlier, opens up so that the coolant from the engine is going through the evaporator case or core, heater core, and that's what creates the heat inside of the cabin. And right now that's working fine. We're getting good heat inside, but when you go to turn it to the cold side, we're still getting heat out of the, like right now the air is blowing out of the vent, and it should be redirected from these vents down to the bottom, and that's not happening. When I turn it over to high heat, every once in a while it'll start working correctly, but like right now the air is coming out of the top defrosters up here on the top. I'm no longer getting air out of the vents. Now it's coming out the bottom. Now that is working the way it should on a high heat temperature setting. That's where you want the airflow to be, not out towards your face, but out towards the bottom, and also up here a little bit to keep the windshield warm, so you don't build condensation and fog inside. When I turn it to fog, that should close the bottom and opens up the top, which it's kind of working right now. It's kind of, some things work and then they stop. Like right now I don't have heat on the bottom, but now I have main force up at the top windshield, and that's where you would want it for fog and for ice, for the ice setting, which is what I have it on right now. So that would be 100% airflow up through here, which it is working right this minute, but it's not consistent. I don't know if it'll keep working, but the more you use it, I would imagine that will help. But also you may find some faults in the vacuum pods, and the vacuum pods are all over the bottom of the dash, and they control the heat doors or air conditioning doors. That's these things right here. See how they have a vacuum hose on them? These diaphragms open and close actuators that move a door inside of the evaporator case. So if you start to have a problem with the air not blowing out of the vent correctly, or it's only coming out of the top of the dash, the fault will be the source. Either the pods themselves are bad, the hoses are cracked or no longer connected, and or the control valve that controls the vacuum that goes to these, which is most likely the fault on all of these. If the vacuum is leaking out of the control head, then you're not going to get vacuum down here, and that's going to make these things fault. And again, there's a bunch of them. There's one way over there on that red line, and there's one over on the other side up under the dash too. You can see that red hose. That is another door that actuates and opens and closes based on the setting of the control head. So right now we're getting really good temperatures out of my out of the dash. When I do get it working, the air conditioning showing about 43 degrees, which is about where you want your Freon. When everything's working correctly, your air conditioning should be around 40 to 50 degrees, and we're right there in that target window. I did notice that the heater control valve, which is this thing right here, what I had to do for making the heater work was plug this in, and if I wanted the air conditioning to be very cold, I unplugged this right here and just put a screw on the end of this. But having it unplugged, what that does is that that closes that valve. And right now, either the source here, as I said before, the source to the control head, and or the valve itself is bad and stuck. So by just simply disconnecting this right now, this allows the air conditioning to be at maximum cool. And I would put a screw in the end of this, something to block it so that you don't lose vacuum. But that'll keep you going there. My recommendation here is, because I know the systems are working, is to kind of get you up to date on where we're at, or where we're at on the climate control system. And as I mentioned in the original estimate, once we had everything working correctly, as far as the Freon charged in the system and that it was producing cold air, the next phase would be to look at all the control elements that make the air come out of the appropriate doors inside of the cabin of the car. So we're there now. My recommendation is to go ahead and look at all the different sources for repairing the other parts of this climate control system. But for right now, being that it's 40 degrees out, you're going to want the heater working, and we have that system functioning. And we recommend that you come this spring, you bring the vehicle back to us. We'll recheck the Freon levels, make sure everything is charged on your air conditioning system correctly, and then we can start looking at making the AC side of the system work versus the heating side of the system, which is currently set up and functioning right now. Let me show you a couple of sources I have for parts. This is an example, a YouTube video of that same part that's in the engine compartment that I was pointing at. This is it completely taken apart. This gentleman shows how to
air conditioning, climate control
repair
system.
the parts or send it to him for servicing, where everything will be rebuilt. And again, with these little parts not working correctly, you're going to have those vacuum doors not operate the way that they should. Here's an example on eBay of the control head. This control head has a lot to do with the doors opening and closing, temperature control, and as you can see here, this is $450. Another $22 to ship it out. But you're looking at some expense here for the other parts of the control head. And a lot of guys, what they'll do is they'll simply take those same vacuum diaphragms and they'll wire them open or closed depending on the winter or summer. I can show you how to do that, and that'll get you back in good shape. But there's a lot, if you type in 1970 Cadillac DeVille climate control, you're going to get a lot of sources for those different parts that are still needing work to get the rest of the system up to where we need it to be. Here's another example of that same servo all put together.
Today's Wednesday, January.
And here's all the
1970 Cadillac DeVille 4-port variant power servo unit for the climate control system. This unit's been completely disassembled all the way down to the final screw, and I'm going to do a functional validation test. This unit will be going to my friend Clint in Tennessee.
So again, this is the control valve, and notice these little ports are where all the vacuum hoses are connected, and this is what allows the doors to open and close. So again, I think we'll need to spend some time here, see about getting this part rebuilt if it's necessary, but we're going to have to focus on this in the spring when the temperatures get back up in the 80-degree mark, because that's when we can really get everything on the air conditioning side working and tested correctly. But as for right now, we have the Cadillac finished up, and it's ready to go back home until this spring when we can get the air conditioning back to where the normal operating temperatures are. We can test out some other items on the car. I'm going to go ahead and check tire pressure on it. It felt like during the road test that it was pulling to the right. Might need an alignment, but for tire wear and everything, you're going to want to make sure this thing is going down the road straight. And I'll double check that pressure reading on the tires to make sure that it's not just an inflated tire that's causing the pull to the right side. This is Manny with Classic Auto Repair. Hope you enjoyed watching this video on the status of an air conditioning system on a 1970 Cadillac DeVille. Have a great day.